Hello everyone, welcome back to some more of The Great Ace Attorney Chronicles. Last time we did a few things. If I go to move tab, let me remember what I did. Let's see, didn't go here. We talked to Lord Van Zeeks. After that, we talked about Miko Toba's favor and the whole thing about Giselle Brett being a criminal back at the Waterloo Hotel. And we lastly saw Cosmo getting scolded out at the Chief Justice's office. And we actually were able to obtain permission to speak with him. So, yeah. I guess right now either we can visit Cosmo or we can visit Mr. Vigil. What do I want to do first? Oh yeah, I also want to apologize. I'm using my normal Switch controllers are like out of battery, so I'm using my Pro controller for this. So apologies if you hear any like clicking noises or whatever. That's just the sound of the Pro controller. Alright, so I guess we'll just flip a coin. Heads. Okay. So I guess we'll go to Mr. Vigil's first. Oh yeah, this might actually be a shorter episode because it's like 10:30 now, and I usually record until like 11. So this one might be like a 30-minute episode, or maybe a 40-minute one. We'll just see. Besides, I don't think there's. Well, okay, there is a lot to go through actually. Oh well. Anyways. This is the ward where Mr. Vigil was brought, apparently. To be frank, I'm a little worried about seeing him again. Oh, he looks about the same.
Ah, the lawyer. Hello again. Are you feeling better now, Mr. Vigil? Yes, thank you. Somewhat better.
I'm so sorry to have caused you to... I mean, it was because of me. If I hadn't exposed your secret, I'd force you to remember things you'd obviously tried to forget.
The prosecutor was here till a few moments ago too. You just missed him.
Oh, Cosmo beat us to it.
He said much the same as you. He was very apologetic. But the truth is, I brought all of this upon myself.
Please, don't think like that.
Keeping it from Evie, my wife, all these years, I've carried such a sense of guilt. But that's not the worst of it. Over time, I obviously came to deceive myself as well. You mean about your dismissal? Looking back now, I'm beginning to think that perhaps Inspector Gregson didn't stumble across me by accident at all. I mean, he compensated me so generously for acting as his stand-in. He was clearly concerned for my well-being and doing what he could to help.
So perhaps Gregson knew exactly what had become of Mr. Vigil all along then.
I'm sure that this is just desserts for 10 years of lies and deception, but... It wasn't me that helped the professor escape 10 years ago. It wasn't me. I swear it. I swear it's true. Oh, Mr. Vigil.
I'm sure you'd rather not dredge up even more from your past at this time, but if possible, could you tell us exactly what really happened then?
I want to. I need to get this all off my chest. I just want someone to tell me what I should have done.
Alright. Oh. Wrong button.
Inspector Gregson was obviously engaged in a special operation of some sort. He was investigating something that even Scotland Yard couldn't know about.
Details of the Reaper's marks, yes.
It was when he had to carry out those investigations that I would take his identification and impersonate him.
You'd pretend to be the inspector and carry out investigations on his behalf?
Oh, no, never. A common street peddler couldn't possibly carry out a proper police investigation. All I would do is go to the specified location and make a little hoo-ha. Just something to leave an impression, so everyone there would think a detective called Gregson was here. So, that's what you were doing on the day prior to the incident? Yes. He asked me to make an appearance at the park on Lime Street for the Redheaded League event. So, as usual, I flashed the inspector's identification around and was very vocal about my presence. But then you were taken prisoner by those red-headed fraudsters! Yes.
So, you would always make a point of showing Gregson's identification card and generally being loud?
That's what the inspector asked me to do, yes. Well, that's one way of becoming a legendary detective, I suppose. Not a good one, though. And as you know, I suffered this bruising around my neck at their hands. But the following day, they kept their word and released me.
Without returning the inspector's identification to you, however.
We had arranged to meet in Fresno Street at the room at 5 that day so I could report back to the inspector. But at the agreed time, that's when I heard the gunshot.
Oh, so that's why he was there in the first place. So, what exactly happened at the prison escape?
It was midnight on the 17th of June, 10 years ago. That was the time scheduled for the execution. But the professor's execution never actually took place, did it? Or rather, the execution itself must have been used to effect the plan of escape. I hardly dare to imagine what a chilling plan it was. Barclay was renowned for being the highest security prison in the country. Everything that went in or out of the place was searched multiple times. But there was one notable exception. Or rather, one notable loophole. Something that was never questioned. I have a feeling I know what that loophole was now. Alright, sorry about that, I was just interrupted for a second. Where was I? I have a feeling I know what that loophole was now. The coffins into which the bodies of the executed convicts were placed, correct? Yes. Once the coroner had confirmed the death of a condemned convict, the body was taken in its coffin for immediate burial in Lowgate Cemetery just behind the prison. The chief warder first had to sign the necessary papers. And after that, no member of staff was permitted to touch the coffin containing the body again. When the executions took place, only the executioner and the coroner were permitted inside the chamber. I would wait in the adjacent room for word that the condemned convict was dead. On that occasion, once I had that confirmation, I went into the mortuary to find a lone coffin as usual. The procedure was that I would sign the paperwork having checked the coffin, then nail it shut. But for some reason that day, the coffin was already nailed shut. No. I didn't think anything of it at the time. I assumed that my deputy must have checked the coffin and nailed it shut before I arrived.
So, you mean the coffin contained...
Yes. I can only imagine that Asogi having escaped his execution somehow, was alive inside the coffin. The coffin was then taken out through the main gates and deposited in No Gate Cemetery. Presumably, there wouldn't have been enough air inside to breathe for long.
So in the early hours following the burial, somebody dug up the coffin again to set Genshin free.
But in the end, he was fatally shot in the graveyard anyway. What on earth really happened in No Gate Cemetery that night, I wonder? I'm afraid I really don't know. All I can say with certainty are two things. Asogi couldn't possibly have escaped that way without help from somebody working in the prison. And that somebody was not me.
I see.
Obviously you knew the man then?
The professor, I mean. Genshin Asogi.
Yes, I remember him well, in fact.
Would you mind telling us what you know?
Well, having been condemned to death as he was, any contact I had with the man was short, obviously. After that trial, which was carried out behind closed doors, attended only by elite members of the judiciary, they called for his execution to be carried out in the earliest possible opportunity.
The outcome of the trial was set from the beginning, wasn't it?
It was a time of delicate diplomacy, when Britain and Japan were in the process of signing an important treaty. That meant that this potentially destabilizing case had to be dealt with swiftly and discreetly.
Let's see.
The man had less than a week in total. As I was the chief warder, I oversaw his short stay in the cells until his final hour. I remember being struck deeply by his noble character and incredible resilience.
What do you mean exactly?
He was a killer of many men, but he was always quiet and polite. He was a gentleman and a man of intellect. In fact, I couldn't bring myself to believe what he'd done, so I asked him one day. Those 5 members of the aristocracy whose lives were taken, were you really responsible?
I'm guilty of the unforgivable crime of ending another human's life. Yes.
Sorry, I don't have Genshin speaks so little. I don't have a defined voice for him. Though I should probably make one, shouldn't I?
The following day, the closed trial took place, and the verdict was no surprise.
Guilty.
That night, when he was brought back to his cell, I saw something unusual.
Something unusual? What?
The last will and testament of Genshin Asogi.
Asogi's will?
As I said, it was on the night following his trial, after he'd been found guilty. As I was doing the round of the cells, and when I looked into Asogi's, I noticed that he seemed to have a sheet of paper in his hand.
Ah, his last will and testament then, presumably.
As soon as he noticed me, he hurriedly shoved it behind his back. But why did you find that so unusual? Isn't it normal for a man to pen a will when he knows his death is nigh? Yes, that's true. But there were special conditions to Asogi's incarceration, you see.
What sort of conditions?
Well, even though he was held in a cell designed for condemned inmates, he was allowed to keep his personal effects with him, with only one exception.
Really?
He was allowed his things?
That is unusual, certainly.
Of course, he'd been convicted of killing 5 members of the aristocracy, but at the same time, he was a guest in our country from the Empire of Japan. the powers that be were determined that his final days shouldn't be needlessly uncomfortable. And, what was the exception you mentioned to the personnel effects he was allowed? That's the point. He wasn't permitted to have writing materials. Specifically, no pens or paper. So, he was prevented from leaving any written record of what had happened to him? Yes, that was the long and short of it. I have no idea where he obtained the paper. Any writing materials have been confiscated from him upon his incarceration. As I said, he hid the paper behind his back and then he pleaded with me. What did you just hide behind your back?
Please, turn a blind eye. This is my lifeline.
But, you know it's against the rules.
You're the only person who's seen. If you just agree to keep quiet.
Alright then. But, what's on that paper?
A lost will and testament. This will is the only weapon I have left now.
How can a will be a weapon? So I decided to pretend I'd seen nothing, and I let him keep his will. But then, later, it just seemed to vanish without trace.
What? What do you mean it vanished?
It would seem that this isn't the end of the story of this mysterious will.
What happened to the will?
I was the only person who saw Asogi's will, but
somehow it disappeared.
it was after Asogi's execution. Which was actually an elaborate jailbreak. The warders gathered up Asogi's possessions that were in his cell. They were all to be sent back to his family home in Japan, you see. To poor Kazuma-sama.
And you're saying that it wasn't anywhere to be found among his personal effects? The will, I mean.
That's right. Though, I didn't search through them myself. But Governor Kaiden was livid. He was screaming. It can have disappeared completely. That doesn't quite make sense though, does it?
In what way?
Well, we understood that only Mr. Vigil was aware of the will's existence. In which case, how did the prison governor know where to look for it?
Oh yeah, you're right.
I really don't know how he knew. But it certainly seemed as though he knew of the will's existence from the outset. Only, he didn't refer to it as a will. What he said was the Asogi papers.
The Asogi papers?
I really can't tell you anything of the subsequent events. Because, well, of what happened.
Your dismissal, and the way you blocked it all from your memory.
I'd forgotten about all this until today. I don't suppose it's relevant to the case, though.
Well, anyway, thank you for sharing it with us, Mr. Vigil. We're very grateful.
I'm afraid there's really little more I can tell you. My wife Evie will be here shortly, so I do hope I don't appear rude, but...
No, not at all. Thank you again.
But what will become of you now? Well, impersonating a police officer is a criminal offense, of course. I imagine that once I'm fully recovered, I shall be arrested.
I'm so sorry.
Don't be, please. This was all my own doing. I always knew that this day would come.
Well, I wish you well. Goodbye, Mr. Vigil. What?
Before you go, there's just one thing.
Oh? Yes? What is it?
The Asogi papers. I'd be very grateful if you'd make no mention of the things I told you about them.
Presumably for some good reason?
It's my understanding that their very existence is a closely guarded secret. If it became known that I'd remembered, well, it could be rather troublesome, I think.
I understand. Alright, some sort of will that Genshin Asogi penned just before his death, which the man himself claimed was his last weapon. I wonder, perhaps that had something to do with his plan to escape? Well, if there's anyone who might know more about a document that Cosmo's father left behind...
It would be Mr. Vigil's governor.
Then we know precisely where we must go. Back to Barclay Prison. Alright then. I was gonna visit Cosmo, but... to the prison! Let's see. Oh, it was up here. Right. 2nd of November, Barclay Prison, Governor's Office. Oh, back again, are you? Yes. Hello. Sorry, I can't pull off a Scottish accent. I've heard all about your investigations. I read the report just now. You found him, eh? Vigil. Yes, luckily. Well, anywho, the laddie does no work here no more, so your case is not to do with Barclay. I wouldn't like you to get the wrong idea about that. Of course, yes, Mr. Vigil stopped working here 10 years ago now, so...
Yes, we've seen his dismissal notice, haven't we? He was given the job.
Aye, Kimmer, you can very well. So, how about a wee handcuff biscuit?
Oh, they really are like little handcuffs. And as hard as irons, too.
So, what's brought you down here today? Well, there's something else we'd like you to ask you about, actually. Is that so? We believe there might have been a document that we disappeared from Genshin Asogi's cell. I think it's been called, the Asogi Papers or something. Did I not say Gregson's death is not to do with things that might have happened in Barclay? Leave the past in the past, Daddy. Let's not fool about with irrelevant details. His expression changed completely. We're clearly onto something here. I half thought he pulled out a gun for a second there. That murder is botched execution, and the old miserable escape. Here were Barclay's darkest hour. Aye, a shocking embarrassment. Because the convict had a collaborator on the prison staff, you mean? Aye, for shame. The coroner confirmed the death of the man after his execution, Courtney Scythe, and my chief ward at the time, Vigil, who was in charge of the whole affair.
But Mr. Vigil says he didn't know anything about it.
The rascal wouldn't say otherwise, eh? More handcuffs?
Oh, how can I say no? You can never have too much iron in your diet.
Ah, about that.
When Mr. Vigil was handed his dismissal notice as a result of what happened, he was so despairing he jumped out of your office window, didn't he?
I didn't like to say, but that's just Vigil trying to get out of it. Do you not think he wouldn't have jumped from the shock of his crime being exposed, eh? I do.
You wouldn't say anything otherwise, though, would you? Of course, I can't shun all responsibility myself. I should never have let him deceive me. Actually, there's barely anybody that kens what went on at the time now. The Gregson haven't been murdered, and Dr. Sy is forbidden from having any visitors. No visitors? Someone obviously doesn't want her giving anything away.
Well, we're not going home empty-handed.
And I wouldn't dream of sending you packing with a note. Come here, take a handcuff or two.
Oh, it'd be rude to say no. Wouldn't want to become anemic.
I suppose, if there's anybody who might still care about what happened back then, it'd be that lass from the forensic division, Maria Gori. Maria Gori? Aye, Sy's daughter. She didn't have no more, just the one. But the wee bairn's following in her mom's footsteps. You didn't ever see her with a scalpel in her hand. Ah.
Mama, what is this?
Ah! Where did she spring from?
And did you just call the doctor Mama?
Dr. Sy's daughter, Maria Gori. We could do something with talking to her. So, she's Dr. Sy's daughter, but her surname is Gori? Or is it Gray? Whatever. Aye, there's some family history, I'm sure, but I did not ken any ins and outs of it. She grew up watching her mum working with the bodies of the folk who died in strange circumstances, and decided to do the same with her own life. I cannot understand it myself. Perhaps she was driven by deep respect for her mother? Perhaps. Anywho, she was in charge of Gregson's autopsy, I believe. Right. And the coroner responsible for this incomplete report. Someone told me once that the wee lassie always loved her mom's stories about cutting up the bodies. There's even a rumour that she used to listen to the funeral march as a lullaby. Well then, perhaps her mother might have told her about the autopsy from the case 10 years ago. Aye, I'd say there's a fighting chance at least. After all, that was a life-changing case for all of us. We really need to speak to Miss Goy herself about this then, I think. Well, thank you very much. I'm not happy about any part of this. It took years for Londoners to finally forget about the whole professor business. Can you not get up on this, laddie? Stop asking pointless questions. I'm sorry. I don't like dredging up these painful memories for everyone. Can you not just stay away, no? Leave me alone and you not come back here? Huh? Wish we could. How'd you come to ken about that, laddie? There's no many folk even in here, in the prison who heard of those papers. Ah, well... I can't tell him Mr. Vigil told me. I'm afraid our sources must remain confidential, sir. Yeah?
That... You believe that? Whoa! Oh, he actually believed that. Wow.
We've been led to believe that the papers are actually a lost will and testament. Is that right? The professors, or rather Genshin Asogi's. Aye, that's right. You're well informed, Jimmy. Oh, at the end of the silent treatment? But then, after the convict's execution, it mysteriously vanished from his cell, didn't it? Hey, there's no. You're off at half cock there. I think you didn't quite get your facts straight. It was there in the cell, exactly where it should have been. Oh. Not what we've heard elsewhere. Let me just have a wee hook around in here. I'm sure I can find it. Aye, here you are. See? The Last Will and Testament of Genshin Asogi, written with a calligraphy brush. Of course, I cannot read over those Japanese squigglers, but I mind it says he leaves all of his worldly possessions to his son back in his homeland. Yes, that's correct. That's the gist of it. So these are the Asogi papers? Aye, of course they are. Papers written by Asogi. No doubt about it. There's no mystery here, laddie. That's your lot. After all, this trapmaster that sliced her of execution. Sliced her. We sent the man's possessions back to his clan in Japan, and that was the end of it. I think we ought to make a record of this, Mr. Naruhodo, just in case. Sliced her. To be occupied with dirty, goofy, or messy materials. Wow, that's an actual word. Alright, so the Asogi papers into the court record. One thing before you go on your way, Mr. Naruhodo. Oh, yes? Those papers are not to do with Gregson's death. I'd prefer if you would make no mention of them outside this office. Or rather, I wouldn't have just prefer it. Consider it an order from the highest levels of our government. I understand. Yeah. Legitimately, like, we made a promise. We're not gonna tell anyone about that we know this stuff. Then we need to go talk to the only other guy that would know about it. Alright. I do not think we have anywhere else to go, so let's head to the prosecutor's office, talk to Kazuma, and I think that's basically what we're gonna do. So this is the office of Prosecutor Asogi now, is it? Also, yeah? Really? They have a scale model in the middle of Gregson, of the crime scene with Gregson there? Legitimately?
Kazuma-sama is doing so well for himself.
Even though he's always forced to kneel on the floor Japanese style in that dark corner.
It's his habit to sit Seiza style whenever he's working.
Kazuma. I thought it wouldn't be long before you paid me a visit, Ryunosuke. I was right about what I said, wasn't I? Sorry? That you have all the makings of a great defense lawyer. Well, I always believed that you'd fulfill your dream of advocating in British courts. I just never imagined for 1 second that I would be as a prosecutor.
Seeing you stand in a phone courtroom, so gallantly realizing your dream, Kazuma-sama, I'm truly happy for you.
And I am truly thankful to you, Judicial Assistant Mikotoba. Also, yeah, you see the difference here? Like, they've known each other for a lot longer than Ryunosuke and Susato, but he still calls her Judicial. He still calls her by her full title, whereas Ryunosuke says Susato-san. And I'm pretty sure Ryunosuke and like Asogi are around the same age. Like, he's only 24. I think Ryunosuke is like 22. So, I mean, it's pretty much the same age gap between Susato. So, like, I don't know. It's just something I noticed, the way they call each other. Like, it's just the way they call each other. Like, because in Japan, I think, like, you only use first names with people you're actually close with.
And it's just interesting to me that that Susato's known Kazuma for longer, but she calls him by his first name. He calls her by her full title, but then she calls Ryunosuke by his last name, but Ryunosuke calls her by her first name sometimes. So it's like, anyways. Maybe that's me looking too deep into it, but meh.
Ryunosuke, I always thought it would be fun for you and I to shake up the British legal system a little together. This isn't quite how I envisaged it, but I suppose it's just another twist of fate.
I've learned a lot of things during my time in London. About how Susato-san's father was himself a visiting student here once, along with Judge Jigoku. And about what happened with your father.
Then you'll have no difficulty understanding
Why I had no choice. Why I had to find a way to get to the Britain as a visiting student myself. I want to hear it from you, Kazuma.
As you wish, Ryunosuke Naruhodo.
It's getting on for a year now, since what happened at the SS Burya. We were heading across the oceans from Japan to Great Britain, when a bizarre series, not a bizarre series, that was weird. A bizarre series of coincidences led to those tragic events. I thought I'd lost my best friend forever.
I must have been unconscious for a long time. When I awoke, I was lying on a bed. It was a narrow little room. There was a posy of flowers by the pillow. It took me a little while to realize I was in the cabin of a ship. I stepped out of the room and headed up onto the deck.
Were you already suffering from amnesia at that point?
Yes. I didn't know what had happened or where I was. There was just this voice in my head. You have something you have to do. Something no one else can know about. Go to Great Britain. Your task awaits you there.
It was a calling I couldn't ignore. It compelled me relentlessly. Out on deck, I saw that I was on a huge steamship and we were docked at a large port. It must have been Hong Kong. Yes, it must have been. Presumably just before they were due to carry your body off the ship.
I had no idea of the situation, but I did have the feeling that this was in some way my last chance. So I concealed myself among the disembarking passengers and went ashore. Then I disappeared into the crowded streets of that foreign port city, so I could plan my onward journey to Great Britain. Just under a year ago, with all my past memories but lost to me, I was left behind in Hong Kong. Everything was foreign to me. The sights, the sounds, the smells. My head reeled. I was truly at a loss. I realized now that I'd escaped as a dead man, with nothing but the clothes on my back. No money, of course.
Oh, how terrifying for you.
Luckily though, I had 2 feathers in my cap. One being your knowledge of English, I suppose?
That's right.
And on the back of that, I was able to pick up some work as a deckhand on a cargo ship. Eventually, after calling at countless ports, I finally arrived at Dover. That must have been some 3 months ago now. Your formidable tenacity of purpose showing itself again. I mean, the man had lost his memory and had literally nothing to his name, but he still managed to make his way to London on the opposite side of the world.
Of course, I had no idea why I had moved heaven and earth to get here at that point. So, how did you end up becoming Lord Van Zeke's apprentice then? That can only be called an extraordinary stroke of luck, really. You see, I was stopped at the border because I had no papers. They took me straight to Scotland Yard. And by sheer coincidence, Lord Strongheart was there to attend a meeting. That's when the second feather in my cap came to play.
Would that have been your knowledge of the law?
Yes, exactly. Lord Strongheart was curious about an Easterner with intimate knowledge of British law. He took me back with him to the Supreme Court and assigned me to the prosecutor's office. And then, 9 days ago, you finally got your memory back after the trial involving Drebber. Yes, I did.
Ever since I first met you at Yume, you talked about your dream.
Mark my words, Reinosuke. I'll be chosen as a visiting student and make my way to Great Britain someday.
Did you know the entire time about what happened to your father here?
16 years ago. When my father left on that exciting trip to Great Britain, I was just a boy. We took a photograph together the day before his departure. It's my last memory of him. But what I had to remember most about my father, it was his unswerving sense of justice. 6 years after he left, a gentleman called at our family home. He told me that Genshin, my father, had been taken ill in England and passed away. It was Professor Mikotoba, your father, Susato-san.
Oh my.
Ever since then, the professor was very good to me. He'd even helped to fund my university education at Yume. I'll be forever in his debt. But, nevertheless, I just couldn't bring myself to believe what he told me.
Oh.
Then, one day, a letter arrived at our house from Britain. There was no indication of the sender, so I opened it up assuming it was no acquaintance of my father. What I read in that letter changed my entire life.
What did it say?
It said that my father had been a mass murderer, and the writer cursed the Asogi name.
Oh no.
As a result of that letter, I had found out what had been hidden from me all those years.
Jeez.
Presumably, the letter was sent from a relative of one of the victims.
If whoever it was had been a member of the judiciary, he would have been present at the closed trial. The letter I received, that my father had been sentenced to death, revealed that my father had been sentenced to death, executed for being a killer. I'm so sorry you had to find out that way. I imagine the British government did its very best to silence whoever sent that letter. But someone who knew the truth and couldn't bear the resentment was always going to be a problem.
But still, it could have been written by anyone. Would you believe such a thing?
There was a newspaper cutting included with the letter. It was the first I'd ever heard of the professor. His terrible killing spree.
Well, what did my father have to say about the letter?
I couldn't bring myself to show it to him.
What? Why not? because he deliberately concealed the truth from me by telling me my father was taken by a fatal illness. That couldn't have been easy for him, and he'd done it out of consideration for my feelings. So instead, I showed the letter to Judge Jigoku. To the other visiting student. He faltered for the briefest of moments, but then he just laughed the letter off. But in that moment, I saw it on his face. He was undeniably shocked, shaken momentarily before recovering his poise. A year later, my bereaved mother succumbed to the strain of grief, and she too passed away. That's when I made up my mind that one day, without fail, I would cross the seas to Britain and seek the truth for myself. The truth about my father, Genshin Asogi. And I wouldn't let anyone stand in my way.
Oh, Kazuma-sama.
Alright, last one. What we learned today in court turned things completely on their head. It was an impressive piece of lawyering for Inosuke Naruhodo. Lord Van isn't the Reaper, you know. I almost don't want to believe it myself, but it turns out that Inspector Gregson himself, the victim, was. It's clear that the inspector was behind the Reaper's activity all along. What? You mean you knew? The real question is, who's been given orders to the inspector? Yes, Barak Van Zeeks is the real Reaper. And I know that 10 years ago, it was him who decided my father must be a mass murderer and sent him to his grave.
No, he was merely seeing that justice was done as the law dictates. He's not to blame.
Ultimately, it's people who condemn people. The law is just a tool that they use to do it.
Yeah? You're a prosecutor, fam. You don't think you're doing the same thing?
And when a man condemns another, he must take responsibility for his actions. Of course he must. But I know for certain that my father would never have taken another man's life.
Kazuma.
On the contrary, my father's life was taken by the Reaper. Nope, that's it. Huh. Oh, I remember we have to present the autopsy report here to do one more thing. This came up in the trial, didn't it? Something a little dubious. I mean, the fact that no time of death was recorded on the Inspector Gregson's autopsy report. Yes, there were some uninfected turns in the courtroom earlier. The suggestion you came up with certainly took everyone by surprise. The idea that the victim died the previous day at some other location is quite something. Well, considering when the pocket was which had stopped in the scorch march on the candle, it's certainly a distinct possibility. The evidence in the scene both point to it. To be honest, it bothered me too. So I paid a visit to the autopsy room earlier. The coroner responsible wasn't there, but I got a name. It's Dr. Gorey.
If it wouldn't trouble you, Kazuma-sama, we'd very much like to speak with the coroner too.
Of course. The last thing I want is for anything to be brushed under the carpet. Scotland Yard's autopsy laboratory is behind Nogate Cemetery. Nogate Cemetery? By Barclay Prison, you mean? Ah, you know it, do you? The prison where my father was incarcerated and robbed of his life.
Kazuma-sama.
Well, thank you. We'll pay a visit to the laboratory later today. Ryunosuke, I want to thank you. What for? For this, you safeguarded the soul of the Asogi clan.
Well, it is a famous story that's been in your family for generations. My only slight regret was that I never got the chance to draw it before I returned it to you.
Karuma is said to have been forged by a master swordsmith during the Sengoku Warring States period. I come from a long lineage of warriors, many of whom were expert swordsmen.
Well then, you're a chip off the old block, I'd say. Dual wielding and all.
This blade is the symbol of the Asogi clan.
Apparently, one of my father's apprentices even took the blade's name for a surname.
Really? Karuma. Yeah? One of my father's apprentices? The Karuma family? Yeah? Think you're funny for those setups?
16 years ago, when my father was a visiting student here in London, he had this sword forever at his side. Which is why it means so much to me that I have it by my side again now too. And that is all thanks to you.
It was an honor.
Now, I have preparations to make for tomorrow. Perhaps I said a little too much.
Kazuma, you've changed.
No, Ryunosuke. I haven't changed at all. It's you who's changed.
I can completely understand your resentment of Lord Van Zeeks given what happened. But the fact is, those events in this case are, well,
Unrelated? Is that what you mean to say? How can you be so sure?
What do you mean?
Never mind. That man is the Reaper, and it's for that reason that the Inspector was killed. I'm going to prove as much in court tomorrow, by whatever means necessary.
I can't let you do that, Kazuma.
I know you'll do what you have to as a lawyer, but I'm sure I don't need to tell you that I won't be taking any prisoners in the courtroom.
I would expect nothing less.
Until tomorrow then, in the Old Bailey.
Alright. So, I guess that'd be it for today. I guess we did a full-length episode anywho, huh? Alright. Anyways, next time we are going... What the... 11:30 was the last time I recorded? Oh yeah, it's Tuesday today, that's right, sorry. Anyways, so yeah, I guess next time we will, visit Maria Gori and, I guess, finish off this investigation segment? I don't know. Anyways, thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all next time.